So this last month has seen a lot of change, if you can't tell by where I'm at right now. But I do have a lot of exciting news for you guys, so I hope you stick around and find out. Hi guys, it's April, and we have now officially hit the middle of the year. So much has happened, even within this last month. I am now officially in my dream library, in my studio slash office slash just whatever I want it to be space, and I am truly enjoying it. As you can tell, the books are slowly starting to accumulate. I've decided that I'm gonna bring it down bit by bit, and so you might see the background of my video slowly change as I get the books that I want down here. I have also started a Teespring shop where I have a few little suggestive reading quotes on different kinds of merchandise. There are a few of the pieces that my shop is selling, along with a link to the full shop. And then of course I have all of my reading stats. So this month I read 10 books, which brings my yearly total up to 105 books. I'm pretty confident in hitting my goal of 130 books for this year. I did put out a mid-year goal freak out video if you want to check that out, where I go more into depth on all of the goals that I have for this year. But it's safe to say that that reading goal is one that I'm fairly confident that I'm going to hit. With those 10 books, the page total ended up being 3,539 pages, which brings the yearly total up to 5,344 pages. I was averaging about 118 pages for the month of June, which ended up being about 3 days per read, which is probably the biggest average that I've had so far this year. For the whole month, I ended up reading for a total of 47 hours and 45 minutes. This brought my pages per hour to around 111 pages. But now you're probably wondering what the heck I read for the month of June. Surprisingly, most of the books I read, I have a video review of some kind of, so that's fun. The first two books I read I want to talk about together, and that is Renegades and Archenemies by Marissa Meyer. I'm doing a reread of this series because I am doing a collab with Steve over at the Lawn Gnome and Shay over at Shay Geeks Out that involves this series. So that means I only have the last book in this trilogy left to read. I do have reviews on both of these books up on my channel, but I liked getting back into the superhero world that Marissa Meyer creates in this. You have Nova, who seems to be on the side of evil, and you have Adrian, who is the son of the two most prominent superheroes in this universe. Things are not always as they seem, and it's really great seeing how Marissa Meyer knew what she was setting up when she was doing this series. The first time I read these, I wasn't a huge fan of Archenemies. It wasn't a bad read, but it felt like a middle book. But now that I know how all of this ends, and I'm really paying attention to what's going on, I'm starting to realize that Marissa Meyer has put a lot into play that I didn't pick up on in this book. And I also have to say, given the climate of what's going on right now in our world, in the United States, and everything that's going on around policing and that kind of things, this really hit home for me in a way I wasn't anticipating. It takes some political views that I think mirror what's going on in our society right now. And that wasn't really the forefront of my mind the first time I read these books, but now going back and reading them, those are really hitting me hard. The next book I read was A Princess in Theory by Alyssa. I have a full review on this book because it is just so darn cute. I needed something light and fluffy just to escape the world for a little while, and this book did that for me. This is the story of Naledi, who is a grad student who is trying to get her schoolwork done at the same time she's working a side job just to make ends meet. She's getting the weirdest emails from a prince in another country that she completely blows off that may or may not actually be the real thing. I like this book because it takes the science world and it just takes this ridiculous romance and it mixes it all together. Now, this isn't the perfect book by any means because there are a lot of things that just don't really make sense if you think about them too hard, but for entertainment value, this read was perfect. Then for my local book club book pick, we read The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is a story of Lo, who is a writer who gets sent on this luxury cruise for her job at a travel magazine. While she's on this cruise, things start to happen. She hears a woman scream, she hears something hit the water. From that point on, Lo is on a mission to figure out what happened to this woman and if something actually did happen. This is an adult mystery thriller. I enjoyed it for the thriller aspect. There were points where I just didn't like the main character. She isn't someone I connected with at all. But I was truly invested in figuring out if this other woman actually existed, what was going on with a lot of these passengers on this cruise, and that is really truly what kept me captivated into the story. There were moments where I was guessing, and there were moments where I knew for sure what was going on, but it did keep me entertained. I then received a NetGalley arc of Under the Willows by Pamela McCord. I have a full review over this book as well. This is the story of Kelly, who after her husband dies, takes her son to live in the house that her husband had inherited. While there, some very strange things start to happen centering around their Alexa Dot. This is a ghost story. This is a little bit of a murder mystery story. And unfortunately, while those elements are something that I really grasped onto, it didn't hit the mark for me. The pacing was off. I didn't believe a lot of the interactions that were happening because the timeline didn't feel right. So I was questioning how grief would have really played out into a lot of this, and the fact that the ghosts in the story ended up being trivialized and became more of like a parlor trick or something to show off than an actual element in the story or a human being that had passed on. I didn't really like some of those aspects. So this isn't a book I would necessarily recommend if you like ghost stories. I also received an art copy of A Girl from Nowhere by James Maxwell. This is the story of Taman, who is a cripple who lives out in the wasteland and knows that to survive means his disability is a disadvantage. And it's also the story of Selena, who is a mystic who doesn't want her power. The two of them end up meeting up in the search for the White City. And along the way, they start to realize some things that are going down politically in the land that they live in. I really liked this story just because of how the world was built up and the things that were going on. There was a lot of political intrigue. There was this world that was built up around this mystic system and the idea that it is completely surrounded by an eternal flame that seems to never go out, which is why the land that they live in is such an arid place. Some of the relationship dynamics did feel a little weird. There was a romance in the story that I don't think needed to be there, but it also didn't completely hurt me from enjoying the story. I believe there is going to be more in this series, which is why I'm calling it a series. And if that's the case, I am interested to see where this is going because it ended at a place where you could have just left it there, but it also has the possibility of being something entirely different and new, and that could be fun. I also picked up an art copy from NetGalley of Beach Nightmare by Steve Foxe. Cat. Good grief. You're gonna be up there. You're gonna have to stay down. So Nissa is now going to help me with the rest of my wrap up, apparently. Beach Nightmare by Steve Foxe and Alan Brown. This is the story of a young girl named Emma who is on a beach vacation when she loses her phone. But it reappears back at her hotel, and when she goes home, her phone is haunted. Now this read is definitely geared towards a younger audience, and the graphics are wonderfully done, and I love the color choices. But for me, it did feel a bit short and underdeveloped. I wanted more from the story, and things seemed to move too quickly. The suspense wasn't really given time to build up and really create this atmosphere that I look for in these kind of ghost stories. But overall, it was a very fun and quick read. I also received an art copy of The Angel of the Crows by Katherine Addison. This is a Sherlock Holmes retelling with angels and demons and werewolf and all the supernatural things, also with Jack the Ripper. I was initially very excited about this read, but it didn't quite hold up. I have a full review over this if you want some more in-depth details as to why, but the brief summary is it was too close to the original source material, that it didn't become enough of its own thing, that it wasn't very exciting to read. And before I forget, I should also note that this story started out as a Sherlock wingfic. So it was originally written as a fan fiction, and it still has that same feeling. I don't think it went through enough editing to really make it stand up on its own. Then for Tell It Again, the book club I host with Shay over at Shay Geeks Out, we decided to read The Dead Queens Club by Hannah Capin. This is a Henry VIII retelling, not to be confused with Henry VIII Shakespeare, just Henry VIII. This is a historical retelling, which I got confused at the beginning, which is why I didn't enjoy this book quite as much as I thought I would. Essentially, they take Henry VIII and his 6 wives, they turn them all into teenagers, and they set them in high school. So you have Henry and all of these ex-girlfriends and a lot of high school drama and angst, and I wasn't too terribly excited by the end of it. Shay and I did a live show. If you want to go and check that out, I of course will link it for you. But warning, there are spoilers, and warning, Shay didn't finish it, and I don't blame her at all because it is not what we expected it to be. And finally, I received an arc of Prince Freya, Volume 2. This is a continuation of Freya's story as she continues to impersonate the prince so that nobody knows that he has passed. I do have to say that I enjoyed the pacing and the action a little bit more in this volume. I still had a little bit of issues with the European setting and translating that into this very Japanese style. Some of it didn't feel right, and the names are still a little weird to me. But the action in this one and the way this volume ended, oh my goodness. So if you are into this series at all, you've got some excitement coming. I believe this book is set to be released on the 7th of July, if I remember correctly. So those were all of the books that I read for the month of June, and of course, all of the new exciting announcements. I will have further videos on the space. I do have a video coming about how I set up my manga collection. I've got that figured out. That's pretty much the only space that's figured out right now. But I will continue to set up this space and record it and put it out for you guys. And if there's anything that you want to see me do, or any of the spaces that you really want to see me organize and decorate and all that kind of stuff, of course, let me know down below. And also, just leave an emoji down below, just random one, no explanation. That'd be fun. And of course, if you want to stay up to date with every time I upload, subscribe, and I heart you beautiful faces. Bye.